Hi everybody, what's going on? Welcome to Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. Special guest in the building, Art Shamsky, 1969 World Series champ. How are you?
Thanks. Good to be here.
It's great to have you here.
Thank
After
you.
the Miracle is out today, first of all, congratulations on the book.
Thanks.
You and Eric Sherman did a wonderful job.
Eric did a great job, and very happy to work with him, and we're all excited about it. It's gotten tremendous reviews, and people seem to like it, and hopefully we'll get our fingers crossed that it'll be popular. But it was a great experience for me to work with Eric and kind of see the players again and talk to them, and hopefully the book will do really well.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through it now, and I'm really enjoying it. And I mean, you lived it, and 50 years ago, like it's crazy to think how much has happened since then. But what a magical year, magical moment in your life. And I love how you guys still have these friendships and relationships going. So,
well, for all of us who are part of that team, our lives really changed October 16th, 1969. I mean, I'm still in New York because of it. It was we all played a lot of years, and for me, nobody talks about the other 12 years that I played 13 years.
Right.
And I understand it because it was such a magical year, and I think that particular season resonated with fans, and they've passed the history on to generations, their children and grandchildren, and people know about that team, and it was very special because of where the team came from in the early years, being the lovable losers, and people actually came to the game to see them lose. And were disappointed when they won, actually. So it was a crazy time, and I think part of the reason that this developed this folklore is because of how bad they were those early years, and then also the fact that that period of time in history was really an awful time in the country with the war in Vietnam. City of New York was really in trouble financially and socially and spiritually, and a lot of problems in the world, assassinations and a lot of bad things. And I think what we did is we made people forget about those bad things for a brief period of time, and they appreciated that, and they've passed that on to their children and their grandchildren. Yeah,
there was a lot going on. Man on the Moon, too. I mean, it was a wild time. So before we get to 69, let's talk about your backstory. How did you first develop that love for baseball, and what were those first few years like in the bigs before you did get to the Mets?
Yeah, I started playing. I grew up in the Midwest, and my dad, like most dads back at that era, just went outside and started throwing and tossing with me, and I was lucky enough to have friends that all they wanted to do was play baseball. And the leagues that I played in as a youngster were very good. A lot of good players came out of, from St. Louis originally, and a lot of good players came out of those little leagues and high school ball and American Legion ball. And so I got a chance to play against some really good players, and I think that really helped me. And again, like I said, playing with friends that all they wanted to do was play baseball, we would make up games in the park in the summertime, and we wouldn't come home till it was dark.
Right.
And it was a little safer time back then than it is now. You don't see that anymore. But
well, kids aren't playing the same way.
No, they're not. It's all uniform now, and it's not. You don't go by parks and see kids making up the game of baseball. And if you want to go see that, you have to go to Venezuela or Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico or Cuba or Mexico. And it was a different world back then. But that's really how I got started. And I spent some years in the minor leagues, and it was a little more difficult back then to make it to the big leagues because there was less teams. Now with more teams and expansions, it's I don't want to say it's easier, but it's more opportunity to make it to the big leagues faster. And so I paid my dues. I spent almost 5 years in the minor leagues, came up with the Cincinnati Reds, and came up with some great players, Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Tony Perez, played with Frank Robinson and Vada Pinson and Tommy Harper, and a lot of great names in Cincinnati. And then when I got traded to the Mets, it was a little bit of a shock for me because I had been friends with those guys for a number of years. Right. And the Mets were a bad team. I didn't like New York. And
yeah, I mean, you're a Midwest guy. It was the polar opposite of that.
It was too big. It was like crazy.
And it's a terrible franchise at the time,
it was a bad team.
Yeah.
And but in retrospect, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened in my baseball career. And 2 years later, we won the World Series. My life changed when we won. I've been here ever since. And so many great things have happened to me on a personal level that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been with the Mets. And it was a special team and a special group of guys, and that's really what the book is about the friendships and the relationships that we made. It's about aging. It's about the process that we've all gone through. But that camaraderie and that friendship with everybody on the team really has stood the test of time. And even though we've lost 10 guys on that team, manager and coaches and players who all died too young, it still is a nucleus of guys who became very close because of where the team came from. You know, it's interesting because when you win after you've lost so much, the winning is that much better.
Yeah, even sweeter.
If you would have come close one year and then won the next year, it wouldn't have been the same.
Right, you were expected if that were to happen, but nobody expected this to happen.
Nobody expected it, and even when we got to middle of August, we were still 9 games behind the Chicago Cubs. And so from that point on, we played unbelievable baseball. And the thing about that team that's really important is that everybody contributed to the success of the team. I mean, we all know about the Seavers and the Koosmans and the Cleon Jones and Tommy Ages and the number of players that were really great players. But the reality of it is everybody on that team, from Al Weiss to Kenny Boswell to Wayne Garrett, Ed Charles, Cranepool, Clendenin, Swoboda, myself, everybody at some point contributed to the success of the team. And that really is, I think, the true legacy where everybody remembers the names. It's not just those top names that people talk about. It's about what Al Weiss did in the World Series, what J.C. Martin did. I mean, and I think that's really a tribute to all the guys on the team.
Definitely, and it's interesting for you because you're platooning at that time. So, you know, if this is 2019, maybe your ego gets in the way and says, I don't want to platoon, I want to play somewhere else.
Well,
and so, I mean, you humbled yourself to do that, but then also Gil used you guys in the right way. I think there's a couple different layers there.
It's interesting you should say that because the truth is that nobody liked it on that team. We platooned in 4 positions and sometimes at 5 behind the plate with Jerry Grody and J.C. Martin. But, and like I said, nobody really liked that because it didn't help your career. You couldn't go in and try to make a few dollars more when you go. There was no agents back then, and they'd say to you, the general manager would say to you, well, you didn't play this day, you only batted this many times. So in the long run, it wasn't really good for you, but the fact was it was working. And we had a strong manager in Gil Hodges who got everybody involved on the team and made everybody who was part of that 25-man roster feel like they were part of the team. And everybody pulled for each other. I mean, if you look at the statistics in right field, Ronnie Swoboda and I had a pretty good year together.
Absolutely.
A lot of home runs and RBIs. And so even third base with Wayne Garrett and Ed Charles and Al Weiss and Boswell at second. And Ed Cranepool and Don Clendenin at first. So he got the most out of everybody. Gil Hodges was the real catalyst on that team, and a strong manager, and got the most out of everybody. And that's really a manager's job. And I'm not sure Gil would be a good manager today, only because it would be difficult dealing with the players and the egos that are around. But somehow I think he'd be able to deal with it. But he was a strong disciplinarian, a tough manager, and really had a feel for the game. It's really, managing's about knowing those guys at the end of the bench who at some point during the season you're going to need them.
Absolutely.
And he got everybody involved, and I think that really is a true test of the team, and that's why people today still remember all the names of everybody who played on that team.
Absolutely. Can you imagine Gil Hodges going out to the outfield trying to pull somebody out today?
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm not sure it would happen, but he was such a tough guy, ex-Marine. He was
perfect guy for your team.
Yeah, you know? He was a perfect guy for the team, and I do believe if he would have lived longer, he died at 47, a couple days before his 48th birthday. I do believe the Mets would have won some more World Series, and I do believe he would be in the Hall of Fame. I think that is a contributing factor of not being in, but there's still a strong group of people that were trying to get him in, and I personally believe he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, great manager. So let's run through a couple moments you mentioned in the book. Let's start with Seaver's one-hitter. I mean, that's a moment that lots of Met fans like to talk about. What do you remember about that iconic night?
Well, I was in right field. It was the almost perfect game, and that's taken on a life of its own. I almost think that if he would have pitched the perfect game, it wouldn't be as popular as it would be having pitched 8 2/3 inning, but it was a great game. And every time he went out on the mound, he was capable of throwing a no-hitter. he was that great a pitcher, and I had the best of both worlds. I played against him before I came over to the Mets, and then behind him, and he was a great pitcher. You could just watch him pitch and see how he was so detailed, and he could beat you with his glove and the bat too. And he was just an all-around great pitcher. I can't imagine him ever wanting to come out of the game before the. I never could think of him wanting to come out of the game in the 6th, 7th, or 8th inning.
Yeah, he wanted
the ball.
Yeah.
But he was like a lot of pitchers in that era, you know, with Koufax and Drysdale and Marichal and Gaylord Perry and Ferguson Jenkins and Bob Gibson and Steve Carlton. That was all National League pitchers back then. But Tommy was I don't like to use the past tense. Tommy is a great pitcher.
Absolutely.
Was a great pitcher,
Right.
but is still around and still viable. But to play behind him and know you had to be on your toes, and every game was going to be a 2-hour game. You're going to win quick or lose quick. But he was such a great competitor, and I watched him really in those years where he was just an unbelievable pitcher. I do believe baseball will show, as history will talk about him in baseball, I do believe he'll be one of the great pitchers of all time.
Absolutely. All-time great, and very great in this season as well. I mean, the pitching staff you guys had was next level. So, I mean, playing right field, you'd get a few opportunities here and there, but the guys on the mound were taking care of it
well,
most of the time.
we had a great pitching staff, and we had great defense. And you know, with Seaver and Koosman 1-2, and then Gary Gentry and Jim McAndrew, and then we had Nolan Ryan, and we had Tug McGraw, and the list goes on. And we had great defense with Jerry Grody behind the plate, and then up the middle, Tommy in center field. But you know, occasionally I saw those guys get hit hard, but not too often. And I have to say this about Koosman: he was as good a second pitcher on any team I've ever seen. And if we don't win Game 2 of the World Series with Jerry on the mound, we might come back to New York 0-2 and then lose 4 in a row, or 2 more games in New York. But we won that second game in Baltimore, and now we're 1-1, and that changed the whole complexion of the series, I believe. And we had a great pitching staff. There's no doubt about it.
And you guys mentioned in the book, if Koos had played for another team, he probably has a few more wins during his career.
Yeah, exactly. Jerry played for some bad Met teams, and I think one year in Minnesota there was a bad year too, if I'm not mistaken. But
and then he becomes a 20-game winner late in his career.
He had great stuff. I said in the book that between him and Seaver was Van Gogh, and Jerry was Patton, and between the two of them there was unbelievable 1-2 punch. Either one of those guys I would pick on any given day to pitch for me, and know that we have a good chance to win. And to play behind those guys and be part of that pitching staff was great. And you know, it's just part of that legacy of that 1960-19 team, the pitching we had, the defense, and all the guys who part of that team was unbelievable.
Yeah, a lot of different things in '69. Let's talk about the Black Cat game, because you mentioned the Cubs. I mean, you guys are down 9 games to the Cubs, and I love how you have the grounds crew guy said who'd never seen the cat again.
Yeah, that's what they said.
That's what they said, right?
Yeah.
But just the fact that it was the Cubs, the fact that the cat stops and looks at the dugout and then goes away, like not even just baseball, but like in your life, that must have been one of the weirdest moments ever.
Stared at Leo DeRocha.
Yeah.
And you know, Fergie Jenkins, who I became friends with, was pitching that game for the Cubs, and told me that if that cat would have come around and stared at him, he wouldn't have gone back on the mound. And we're all superstitious.
Absolutely.
But it was really freaky, and it's true. I never saw that cat before that game, and never saw him afterwards. So I don't know. Somebody was watching over us, but it was just one game in a year that had so many bizarre situations. We had the Seaver almost perfect game. We had the Steve Carlton game where he struck out 19.
Yeah.
Ron Swoboda hits 2 two-run home runs. We win that game.
Crazy.
We had a no-hitter pitched against us by Bob Moose of Pirates. I made the last out in that game. There was so many eerie things that happened that year, and we overcame everything, or we gained stuff from those games, and it's a year that you can talk about so many different things, and that's why this 50th anniversary is so special.
Absolutely. So we were talking off camera about Earl the Pearl Monroe. You've written about Joe Namath in the past. These legends in New York, and winning in New York, we hear it's different than anywhere else. You lived it. So when you think about once you guys won the championship, how did life change for you after that?
It changed tremendously. I would have never done the things that I've done over the years. They took 7 of us to Vegas to make fools of ourselves in Vegas at Caesar's Palace. We sang there. They named a dog after me on Everyone Loves Raymond. I did so many things. Yeah, you talk about those players that were icons. You stop and think about 1969 with the Jets winning. Mets winning and the Knicks winning. And stop and think about Namath running off the field, pointing his finger in the sky, and then Cleon Jones going down to one knee to catch the last out of the World Series, and then Willis Reed running onto the court for the Game 7 with the bad knees against the Lakers. Those are icon moments in the history of baseball and sports. And so to me, just the 3 of those events are just in itself are great to talk about. But it was a wonderful year for sports back then, and we were part of that trifecta that all the teams won for the first time. But the Mets, I think, resonate with the fans more so than the other 2 teams, and they were great teams. There's no doubt about it. But the Mets, because of where we came from, as I spoke before, and what was going on in the city and the country at the time. And over the years, I've had people come up to me and said, I was going through a really tough time, or I was in Vietnam, or I was going bankrupt, or whatever it might be. I wasn't well, and you guys made us feel better about where we were in our lives at the time. You can't say anything better about doing something in your life than that, making people feel better about their lives. And so I think all of us who are part of all those 3 teams, but particularly the Mets, feel like we help people get through some tough times. And I think that in itself people remember. And I've had so many people over the years tell me they were at the game we won to win the division against the Cardinals. And they were there at the World Series, and they were there for the playoffs. And the ballpark only holds 53,000 people. But everybody I met over the years had been somewhere at that ballpark, and I just agree with them. I said it was great. You know, I hope you enjoyed the game. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an amazing time, and I think the cool thing is that you've kept these relationships going. And it's hard to maintain relationships when people aren't in your life every day. So just take me through how you've developed these relationships after the team and bringing this whole trip together to go see Tom out on the West Coast.
Well, winning always helps, you know, but I think winning after you've lost so much that really kind of firms up the bondage that you have with these players. And I tried to maintain the relationships. Not everybody lives in the area.
Right.
We've had some reunions over the past years. We had a 25th reunion back in 1994, which was really nice. And that was a year of a strike, so that hurt us a little bit. But you know, just the closeness that team had, and because everybody did contribute to the success, I think really kind of bonded us together. And it was a good group of guys. We had a wonderful clubhouse with guys that would make you crazy at times, like Don Clendenin and Tug McGraw and Jerry Koosman. And then we had the quiet guys like Ed Charles and Ron Taylor and Jim McAndrew and Cal Kuntz. We had this group of people that was totally different, but all together in this quest to win a championship. And again, that's part of that is Gil Hodges, who was able to do that. We had a great coaching staff, and Eddie Yost at third, Yogi Berra at first, pitching coach Rube Walker, Joe Pignatano in the bullpen. Just it was a cast of characters, and every team has characters. But for some reason, I remember things about these guys that you never forget. The closest, Eddie Charles, for example, who had struggled for so many years to make it to the big leagues because he had to go through the Negro leagues and
totally different time.
Buried in the minor leagues for years, and was a terrific ball player who should have been in the big leagues much earlier. But to listen to him and his calmness about things and his view of life, he was a poet, and he would sit there, and as crazy as Don Clendenin might be at times, who was sitting next to him, yelling across at one of us about something, and he would be the calming influence in the locker room. And when he passed away last year, it was a sad time for me because he had meant so much to the team. And I think everybody felt that way about guys who have passed away. Tug McGraw, Tommy Agee.
Yeah, a lot of guys.
Cal Kuntz, and Gil died when he was 47. So it's been tough, but there's still a nucleus of the guys, and I try to maintain the relationship and stay in touch with them. And when we decided to go to California, Eric Sherman and I decided to write this book, we wanted to do something different. We didn't want a book that just kind of talked about every game and what happened in those games. We wanted to make it special for this 50th anniversary, and it's really about the relationships and being able to see the guys again. And we knew Tom Seaver wasn't traveling back to this area anymore, so we decided to take a trip out there. And even that in itself was difficult because we had to coordinate the 3 other guys to go.
Getting everybody to the airport.
Getting to the airport, and they had some health issues. And then once we got there, we didn't even know if Tom was going to feel well enough to see us.
Right.
And as luck would have it, the guys made it on time to the airport, and then we got a chance to see Tom the next day. And it was a revelation to spend some time with him. Buddy Harrelson was one of the guys who's already announced that he's got early stages of Alzheimer's. So having those guys together, who were roommates and very good friends, was really, I think, good for both of those guys. And we were able to sit down and reminisce and spend time with Tom at his house, and then go out to lunch and tell stories and talk about how important that season was to us, how important all of us were to each other.
Absolutely.
And it was just a revelation, like I said, for us to spend time together. And that really is the crux of the book, the trip out there and then talking to all the guys about their thoughts about that year and their feelings about everybody else. And that really is the book, what his book's about, and it's just about friendships and the camaraderie.
Yeah, and a trip that you'll never forget.
Never forget.
And a time in your life that you'll never forget. Well, Art, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Nice to
really
see
great to meet you. You can grab After the Miracle. It's now available in bookstores. We'll see you next time here on The Sit Down.